So it's a real pleasure to welcome you, Jean, to the Multispecies Coronavirus Reading Group. You've offered us a really interesting paper that explores the slaughterhouse industry of Brazil, in particular, southern part of Brazil, where meat is apparently, one of the most important things in natural cultural worlds there. You also really eloquently, I think, outline some of the problems with the exoticizing gaze towards the Wuhan wet market. You might have picked up on the recent paper published just in the last couple of weeks that didn't, in fact, find any bats or pangolins in the market. So probably not a surprise given your analysis. And you introduced us to a lot of important ways of thinking about this event through the language of emergence, entanglement, illnesses of becoming, and also the sort of suffering that is shared in the slaughterhouse and broader agribusiness ecologies. And you ask us to think about the different modes of care that we might develop and accounting for these really complicated entanglements and worlds. So I was wondering maybe if you could just update us. So you talked about the political economy of the slaughterhouse. You talked about the workers that went on strike a little more than a year ago when we had the early pandemic, and how, like in other places, Germany and the US, these slaughterhouses were sites of super spreader events. And now that we're a year out from the initial outbreak, how do things look in southern Brazil? What's kind of the latest that you're seeing on the ground?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. First, thank you, Eben, and thank you, Rachel. So I need to thank you, my colleagues, Luisa Mutillo and Luisa Beck, co-authors of this paper, and my researching team, including Caetano Sordi. We are researching about meat packers in this kind of context of pandemic. But we have a lot of discussions about human-animals relations in Brazil. So firstly, when we wrote this paper, we are trying to introduce a discussion about a multi-species health approach to think about the pandemic situation in Brazil. So as you read in the paper, in the first 6 months of the pandemic in Brazil, we have a lot of contaminations, a lot of cases in meat industry in Brazil. So we were a bit uncomfortable with the narrative, so coronavirus centered and so exotic narrative about the human-animal relation. So because of the pangolins, because of the civets, and we think this kind of narrative echoes a historical approach against the tropics. So the dangerous nature in the tropics. So when you think about human-animal relations in this case, we are talking about animals like a threat against humans in this kind of relation. So this is the first point. And the second point, it's interesting because in 2020, the Brazilian cattle herd was the largest globally and representing 14% of the world's flock. And if you add in pork, beef, and chicken production, Brazil had 10% increased during the pandemic crisis. Well, this is a point. However, the country entered in the hunger map again. Yeah, we are living in so bad conditions now. So, in other words, in our point, agribusiness doesn't produce food for people. Agribusiness feed Wall Street scores. Agribusiness cultivate money, degradation, suffering, pain in Brazil and other countries too, but not only food. So we wondered about why the narrative against civets, against so we call exotic ways of consumption, but the pandemic crisis do not put in agenda the agribusiness situation. So we think it's worst the situation. So between human and animals, but working relations, but ecological relations in the case of agribusiness, rather than the local situation. So we're trying to discuss these 2 points in this case of the pandemic, and especially a point of a multi-species health condition in this paper. It's a kind of criticism to One Health politics or One Health practices, because we think that One Health it's okay, put together humans, animals, and environment, but using cross-culture indicators, using a global indicators. It equals global health frameworks, but we think in trying to discuss in this situation from a multi-species view, we can value local situations or local sensibilities, local ways how humans and animals get together. Because, for example, I put an example here. If you don't know, if you get milk from a cow, now if you are a small farmer and you trying to get milk from a cow, you can put your hand in the cow because it's dangerous in a biosecurity framework, in a One Health framework. So we need machines to get the milk. We need to conduct your relation under protocols. And when you think about in this kind of situations, get the milk from a cow, need to a shared trust, need a sensibility, need a kind of non-protocol, I need some help, Ana.
Tá bom, fala em português.
Pois é. Não, a questão eu fico pensando, né, quando a gente fala em termos de saúde global, ou em termos de One Health, essas relações entre humanos e animais, elas acabam sendo muito distanciadas. Ou você não pode, por exemplo, ter um contato mais íntimo com um animal, como esse, de tocar os tetos de uma vaca para tirar leite. Essas relações elas acabam sendo destruídas, porque para você entrar num circuito de mercados globais, ou num circuito de vender o leite, por exemplo, você precisa usar máquinas, você tem que ter outros protocolos, são protocolos de higiene, etc., que não são, né, as mesmas formas com as quais você conduz essas relações localmente.
Tá bom.
Então,
tá bom, então vamos parar aqui. Tá.
tá.
Tá bom. Okay, so what he was saying is the question is, when we think about the context of One Health, we always need to be thinking about the human-animal relations as well, but they are contingent on a certain understanding of a distance between the animal and the human, so that they don't have a contact. But this is wrong. When you touch the cow in order to milk the cow, right, you will have a very close proximity to the udders of the cow when you're milking the cow, and in order to sell the milk, it needs to follow certain protocols of health, and in order to be able to do that, you cannot just milk the cow with a hand, but actually you need to use a machine, correct? Is that what you're trying to say? Você tem que usar uma máquina para extrair o leite da vaca. É isso?
Exato. Assim, essas relações são todas mediadas por protocolos, né? Quando você entra, por exemplo, num esquema de mercados, né? E isso é diferente, por exemplo, de você pensar uma relação mais tradicionalmente situada, mais culturalmente situada, que é o ponto que a gente queria mostrar, o quanto que por exemplo, o agronegócio termina com essas relações, ela sufoca essas relações, porque você precisa entrar nesses lugares de protocolos o tempo todo, né? É um pouco desse. Eu vou entrar depois na sequência para falar da biossegurança nesse caso.
So basically, the agribusiness suffocates this kind of a more intimate relationship between the human and the animal, because they have to follow these very strict protocols. They have to be in compliance with these very strict protocols of hygiene, so mediated by protocols when you're in a market situation, and everything that is culturally situated cannot be followed within the framework of agribusiness because of these protocols of hygiene.
Okay. Então, nesse caso a gente quis trazer um pouco, né, num primeiro plano nesse artigo, essa diferença entre os tipos de relação entre humanos e animais, o quanto que um paradigma baseado na biossegurança ou baseado em protocolos de saúde global, indicadores internacionais, ou supraculturais ou cross-culturais, o quanto que eles invisibilizam essas relações locais e, pior, né, tornam essas relações locais uma ameaça, ou narram elas como uma ameaça, como é o caso de comer civetas e outras coisas, outros animais, ou em outras relações dito exóticas.
So in this case, so in this case, as he talks about in the article, there is a difference between human and animals, and there's this paradigm based in global health, which includes supra and cross-cultural settings, and it turns the local relationships quite difficult. So you cannot do these practices and carry out these practices as they would be done in a cultural setting, because you have to be in compliance with this global health protocol.
Yeah, I really liked those aspects of the paper that were panning out from the reductive logic of biosecurity that tries to, isolate and identify a particular virus or eliminate risk through security protocols, and the ways that you're attentive to all of the layers of history and political economy that are at play. This quote on page 106 about the lack of clean water and washing hands and the crowded buses that are part of the transportation infrastructure that bring people to the facilities, the ways that poor peoples, African peoples, women, indigenous peoples become essential in the service of the elite, and the global middle class, it sounds like too, in China as well, with the flow of meat going back. And I really liked it. I mean, you didn't explicitly identify One Health as what you were writing against in this paper, but I think it's a really, and I'm glad to hear it come out in the comments now. And I think it's a really important thing that you're onto here. What One Health naturalizes certain forms of capital accumulation, certain forms of exacerbating social and economic and ecological inequities, and you're doing the work of unflattening here to think about how not only are we looking at an illness as becoming with this meat infrastructure, this meat industry infrastructure, but yeah, all these other processes are coming into view in this same space. Kriaki, do you want to jump in with your question too? And we're giving you a lot, Jean, to respond to. And
yeah, I would like to comment a little respect here. Yeah, this is another important thing for us because the so coronavirus-centered narrative hiding the social inequalities. Because I have worked with Aedes mosquitoes since 2014, for example, and with trying to get the politics with about Zika and dengue and chikungunya and yellow fever. So four so different diseases, but it's the same politics because all of them are based into to control and to surveil and to control the mosquito. The mosquito is the infrastructure, but it's the same infrastructure, and it's a kind of global infrastructure since Rockefeller times. So where is a mosquito, you can control it because they can spread these four diseases. But I repeat, four so different diseases. The pandemic now, the COVID-19 pandemic, it's a kind of I'm sorry. We can think the same framework. The coronavirus, it's a kind of infrastructure. So we have a global pandemic, but not an universal pandemic. So it's the same infrastructure, but local situations, it's too different. So because of the social inequality, because of the deregulation and the laws, because of the use of I don't know, the in the case of this paper, especially migrants and other precarious work. So we have a problem when we use only the biosecurity focus, because biosecurity allows us to map virus too fast. So we can map in the virus, we can discover the mutations and other things. So, but the biosecurity technologies can see this social inequality. So we can map the virus, but workers, some of the workers often work positive to COVID because they can stop to work because they need their wage. So this kind of social inequality, biosecurity intervention can't see. We have a kind of threat worse than the virus. We have Bolsonaro in Brazil. Biosecurity intervention can stop Bolsonaro. Biosecurity intervention can stop the poverty. Biosecurity intervention can stop the racialized relations in Brazil. So this is a point that we're trying to show in this paper. So in agribusiness, for us, it's a good example because agribusiness industry is based in biosecurity protocols. So it seems okay, but no. And under the biosecurity protocols, we have ecological degradation. We have suffering relations with humans and animals. We have suffering work relations because we employ in Brazil almost all workers are migrants from Venezuela, Senegal, and Haiti under low conditions to work. So biosecurity, so in this case, in the agribusiness case, facilitates the capitalism, the global capitalism, but facilitates the imperial mode of life, like Wissen wrote recently, but can offer security for people, for workers and other things. World Health Organization including defending, we wrote in the paper, defending the meat. No, the meat is security because of the biosecurity, of course. But people are dying to producing beef in this kind of industry. So this is a great thing for us. But it's only a comment.
Thank you. So we have some questions stacking up. So Kyriaki, if you want to ask yours, and Frederic, you also have a hand up.
I'll give the floor to Frederic because mine was just a comment of what I appreciate in the paper, and it's exactly kind of this emphasis on the link between what has happened in agrobusiness, capitalism, issues of precarity. So it wasn't a question per se. I have a question that I ask later, but maybe Frederic can go ahead.
Thank you. Thanks, Jean, for this excellent paper. I have a PhD student who's now working in Rio Grande do Sul, in the village of Alpestre, which is the rural mountain area where they do a kind of traditional agriculture based on kind of German style breeding. And he shows that there's a criticism of the system of vaccines and antibiotics and a use of traditional ways of healing. And he relates that to the current criticism of vaccines for humans against COVID-19. So what is your view on the use of vaccines and antibiotics in the meat industry in relation to all the debate about the vaccines around COVID-19? Is there a possibility to share the mistrust toward vaccine between humans and animals?
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Frederic. And I think I will answer in Portuguese in this case. Acho que nós temos vivido uma situação realmente muito difícil no Brasil, em torno do que tem sido chamado de negacionismo, né? Então, esse negacionismo passa por muitas coisas. Uma delas envolve a desconfiança em relação à vacina, mas também um grande investimento que alguns políticos no Brasil, sobretudo o governo Bolsonaro, obviamente, fez em torno de tratamentos que não são eficazes para Covid, o uso de vermífugo e o uso de cloroquina, por exemplo.
Ok, para aí.
Falar, depois eu continuo.
in answer to what Frederick Keck was just saying, so there's the lived situation in Brazil is very difficult in terms of negationism. And this has two aspects. On the one hand, the distrust of vaccines. They don't trust vaccines in Brazil to a large degree. And the second point is large investments for treatments that are not effective. And this goes back to the presidency from Bolsonaro. So it's chloroquina, and then the other one was what?
Vermifurro e vermectina.
Vermifurro is like worms, anti-worm therapy.
Yeah, yes. E especialmente quando você sai, por exemplo, vai para algumas cidades mais do interior, a gente tem um projeto de pesquisa grande e a gente está acompanhando, por exemplo, a serra, a região de montanhas aqui no Rio Grande do Sul. E há um investimento muito grande das prefeituras locais em distribuir esses medicamentos que não funcionam, né? Ao invés de investir nas vacinas. Mas tem uma questão que se torna muito importante nesse campo e que tem a ver com uma discussão mais ampla em termos das relações de saúde nos trópicos, né? Se quiser falar, depois eu continuo esse ponto em diante.
Right. So as Jean was saying, especially going to cities in the rural areas, in the mountainous regions of Rio Grande do Sul, where you're based, correct, Jean?
Yeah.
And so there are these programs that are trying to prevent this policy of negationism. So they're trying to be very aware that you wouldn't use the chloroquina or this worm treatment only. So there is these programs in mountainous areas and in rural areas in the Rio Grande do Sul area. And then secondly, you were talking about a discussion that revolves around terms of health in tropical regions.
Yeah, because the first Rockefeller's campaign in Brazil was against the worms. So ancylostomiase disease, I don't know ancylostomiase in English.
O que era isso? Fala de novo, o que era isso?
É uma doença de vermes, assim. Essas terapias que a Rockefeller fazia no Brasil no início do século passado, elas eram contra doenças que envolvem vermes, né?
Então, isso que você está falando que as doenças de Rockefeller tinha no Brasil, no século passado, isso é uma doença de verme?
Havia um dos problemas, um dos principais problemas, quer dizer, não é um dos principais problemas. A Rockefeller, quando ela começa a fazer campanhas contra doenças no Brasil, numa política de internacionalização da saúde, ela se foca justamente nessas doenças de vermes. No caso, né? Então, assim, a ideia era que os trópicos, eles eram perigosos porque as pessoas tinham vermes, porque nós vivíamos no meio da sujeira, porque nós tomávamos água suja e coisas nesse sentido. Então, primeiro, junto com a febre amarela, era matar mosquitos por causa da febre amarela e eliminar os vermes porque vivíamos, entre aspas, na sujeira.
Tá.
Então isso é um histórico, né, no Brasil.
Mas esse Rockefeller, was this a disease or what is that?
No, it's the foundation.
It's a campaign.
Foundation.
It's a foundation. Okay.
Yeah.
So
the
there
campaigns
was
against hookworm diseases.
Yeah. So there is a campaign called the Rockefeller campaign, and it's against illnesses in the tropics, mainly diseases that come from worms. And as he was arguing, the tropics are dangerous because of worms, dirty water, the favorable climate, the humidity. He also said that there was this campaign, Rockefeller, was not only to fight worm diseases, but also yellow fever. So it was, they had to kill mosquitoes.
And this is the frame is the tropicals is dangerous because the worms and because the mosquitoes. So in this case, this is a kind of imaginary of a strong imaginary that a nation that is built against the worms. We need to find against worms to build a strong nation. This is a kind of historical imaginary in Brazil. So the worm drugs, in this case, ivermectin, this is the drug. It was a kind of solution against foi uma solução. Os vermífugos, então, no início do século, foram uma espécie de solução contra, né, os problemas nos trópicos. Essa era a ideia que se tinha, e isso construía uma nação forte. Então, para muitas pessoas ainda, os vermífugos, eles formam uma imagem de limpeza, de saúde, uma imagem de progresso. E é um pouco desse tipo de imaginário que hoje é colocado em cena no contexto da Covid, né? Você confunde higiene do século passado com o cuidado em relação à pandemia agora. E é por isso que talvez as pessoas ainda acreditem muito nos vermífugos, né, em algumas situações e desconfiem das vacinas, por exemplo.
So as he was saying, Jean, so the solution against illnesses born from worms in tropical areas, it was very important in the previous century to build the image of a strong nation and have the image of progress. So this notion, this idea of killing worms, or in Portuguese it's called Vermifurro. So these are the medications that kill worms. They're used, this idea is also used for the coronavirus, even though this would not be the right medication, but the people still believe in this, that a worm medication would be able to eradicate the illness. And that's why the Rockefeller Foundation is trying to make this campaign in order to re-educate people. Is that correct, Jean?
Yes, yes. On the other hand, it's complicated to think about it because some people usually get this kind of drugs take these drugs with tea or praying for some gods, and we compound this a kind of non-biomedical treatments. So it's really common. And in this case, when we talking about negationism, we have a problem too, because sometimes negationism is related to biomedical framework and is related a kind of, again, coronavirus centered framework to the pandemic. So we can combat the scientist negationism using a cultural negationism, because this is a kind of a cultural way to carry on, pray for something or take I don't know, tea and other kinds of treatments, non-medical treatments. So we have a so complicated situation that so some people get a vaccine shot praying for God. it's a kind of ambiguous situation, but it's a real situation. So people not de novo, Ana, as pessoas não estão necessariamente sendo negacionistas quando elas fazem isso, mas elas costumam misturar várias coisas. Elas rezam, elas usam tratamentos locais, como chás, ervas, outras coisas, e também tomam vacina. Então, é uma situação muito, muito complicada, porque o negacionismo parece que ou você acredita ou não acredita na ciência. Mas a questão é que ciência, em que ciência é para se acreditar? É só na ciência baseada na biologia? Só na ciência baseada em vírus? As pessoas também acreditam em outras coisas e tem outras maneiras de se cuidar. Por exemplo, eu converso com pessoas que, sei lá, abrem as janelas de casa para deixar o ar entrar, o ar puro. Isso também é um imaginário muito histórico, a ideia de que você precisa respirar ar puro para viver. Mas, assim, obviamente você não vai ficar em lugares fechados, porque os lugares fechados realmente facilitam a contaminação. Então, essas coisas são um pouco embaralhadas, assim, sabe?
So, as Jean was explaining, so there is a mixed understanding because people they mix together either praying, also treatments of taking teas and herbs, mixing that with other medications as well as the vaccine. So this leads to a difficult situation where they're trying to combine both believing in science and not. But people also believe in other things. And as he was saying that in Brazil, it is common to open windows because of the mold and the humidity. And so this airing out and the notion of letting the stale air out and having fresh air come in is something that people would do as well in order for the virus not to spread, which is something that is correct, right? I mean, to have a room closed with air is conducive for the virus to spread. Yeah.
Yeah, because as pessoas fazem isso às vezes por outros motivos, acabam acertando, mas
so people do that actually for other reasons, but actually they do the right thing. And also I wanted to say that this medication Vermifurro in English is anthelmintic therapy.
Yeah. And when I told you about this imaginary of open windows, it's not the same to don't get close because of the virus. Open the windows is an historical imaginary about the miasmas. So it's a different thing. But yeah, from the wrong ways, people it's correct, but it's so confused imaginaries of the disease. Hygienism and carry-on. It's so different things, but so close in this case.
And maybe there's also an interesting way to kind of re-signify the miasma theory, you know, something that is before the microbe is localized, before you have, you know, Pasteur, you know, dispensing with the idea of bad air, you know, coronavirus transmission is in a sense bad air. So it's a, you know, there were viral particles being transmitted, and now we just have a more rich and nuanced way of thinking about them. I want to give Stefanie an opportunity to ask her question.
Yes, thank you. Very interesting. And just this discussion reminded me we already have read a couple of pieces about the cheese in this reading group and how the mechanization and industrial practices are particularly hygienic practices are threatening the dairy industry, local dairy industry, and threatening the local traditional cheese making. So it's quite makes sense in that sense. But I would like to ask you a different question for the meat industry itself. So from your reading, I had the impression that somehow this wild markets hunting itself provide a diverse way of the producing food and engagement with multi-species relations. So in context of Brazil, what is your position about the hunting and wild animals?
Yeah. Ana, eu vou precisar de você.
Ela estava eu não preciso traduzir no português.
Não, acho que a questão eu entendi em relação a
caça e os animais silvestres.
Caça, né? Então, a gente tem muitas restrições no Brasil em relação a, obviamente, é proibido a caça para consumo, mas ela é permitida em alguns casos, né? Por exemplo, né, o Caetano é um colega que o Frederic, inclusive, conhece. Caetano Sordi é um colega que trabalhou com controle de javalis aqui no sul do Brasil. Então, esses javalis, eles podem ser consumidos, só que não vendidos, né? Eles podem ser abatidos para o consumo porque eles são invasive exotic species. Eles são considerados espécies invasoras. Nesse caso, eles podem ser abatidos para o consumo, mas eles não podem, como eu disse, eles não podem ser vendidos dentro de circuitos comerciais porque não há autorização para isso, né? Não temos protocolos, por exemplo, de saúde para isso.
Yeah. So in Brazil, there are many, so as to your question, Sevgi, there are many restrictions regarding hunting. So in at first, it is forbidden to hunt. And as he and a colleague called Caetano, whom Frederic Keck also knows, there is this javali, which is boar control. So for instance, you can hunt javali and this boar, and you can also consume it, but it is forbidden to be sold.
Yeah, only this case.
And so this was somebody called Caetano did research on that, correct?
Yes, PhD research about.
And what's his whole name? Caetano what?
Sordi, S-O-R-D-I.
Sordi, a Caetano Sordi is a PhD student who is doing research on this hunting of boar. Yeah.
Interesting. I've got two questions. One that emerges from our previous discussions in the reading group. So we engaged with some other work in Brazil that seemed to suggest that the coronavirus pandemic hadn't impacted rural communities and indigenous communities as much. So I'm wondering if that's still true, and in part this relates to our discussions last week. So last week we were talking with a virologist who was looking at global patterns of spread and speculating that coronavirus might be a so-called clean hands disease. He's really interested in good viruses that might protect us from other viruses. And so so my first question, and maybe I'll ask the second one later, is this urban-rural divide still playing out in Brazil? Are most of the infections in cities and places where people might have clean hands, and in the rural places less infections? What do you make of this suggestion of a virologist that it's maybe in part a result of not having enough viral exposures?
Se eu entendi direito, né, Ana, em que lugares a gente tem mais situações de contaminação, nas cidades ou
nas áreas rurais, sim.
Acho que nós temos diferentes questões aqui no Brasil. Uma delas, acho que é muito importante dizer, por exemplo, a pesquisa que a gente faz questionou muito desde o início o quanto que essa ideia de que o vírus seria democrático, ou seja, que todas as pessoas estariam igualmente em situação de se contaminar. E nós questionamos isso, nós contrariamos muito essa ideia, justamente dizendo que não. Bom, o vírus pode ser o mesmo, mas a pandemia não é democrática, porque as pessoas vivem em condições muito desiguais. Por exemplo, assim, em comunidades muito pobres, nas grandes cidades, muitas vezes as pessoas não têm nem água limpa para lavar suas mãos. A gente estava falando antes da situação dos trabalhadores da indústria da carne, mas poderia ser de qualquer outra. Por exemplo, na indústria da carne, os trabalhadores eles vão em ônibus que são fretados pelo agronegócio. Esses ônibus estão sempre lotados de pessoas. Esses trabalhadores não têm dinheiro para comprar máscaras, por exemplo, adequadas, né? Ou eles não podem parar, como eu falava antes, porque senão o seu salário é descontado. Então, esse tipo de situação coloca as pessoas em diferentes graus, né, de exposição, ou seja, o risco não é o mesmo, a vulnerabilidade não é a mesma, né? Você tem, por exemplo, trabalhadores, a população negra no Brasil geralmente está desempenhando trabalhos que são mais precarizados e com menos condições de se cuidar, obviamente. Foram convertidos em trabalhadores essenciais, então eles não podiam parar durante a pandemia. Então, esse tipo de situação a gente começou a se preocupar, e tanto nas cidades do interior quanto nas cidades maiores, nas capitais, né? Você tem diferentes graus de exposição à pandemia. Então, hoje fica difícil dizer se é mais complicado nas áreas rurais ou nas áreas urbanas, né? Porque você realmente tem muitas desigualdades no Brasil.
So there, as Jean was just saying, so this is a question that he also discussed in his research, as you asked, Eben. So the idea that the virus is democratic can everyone get infected in the same way? So he says that the pandemia is not democratic. There is poor communities within large cities, within the urban areas where people cannot even wash hands. So the spread and the rate of contagion is higher there. And those who are working, as he discussed, in the meat industry, those workers, they will after work go and take public transportation, such as buses that are very crowded. And they don't have the means to buy adequate masks. They also, there's no option to be able to stop working, because then they would not get paid during that rupture of work. So there are really very different levels of risks and of contracting the disease. As Jean also said, the essential workers, those who are in the service industry, oftentimes can work under precarious conditions. So as he said, there's really, going back to your question, there's a distinction between rural and urban areas, and there are different grades of exposure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And we have a lot of political problems, because in the small cities, we feel that Bolsonaro is too present. So the negationism, the politics of the negationism is so increased in rural areas. So it's a problem too, yeah. But it's not too different in the rural area and urban area, the problems with the COVID. Yeah, but
thanks for clarifying. My other question was related to the cold chain hypothesis in China, and I'm posting in the chat just a quote from your piece that offers a new perspective on it. I wasn't aware that some chicken from Brazil had COVID detected on it. I'm just interested in hearing more. I mean, we all heard about the cold chain hypothesis if we're following the news and the recent WHO report. So I'm just interested in understanding what that controversy looks like from Brazil.
Yeah, because Bolsonaro and his sons usually says the China virus, the China pandemic, and yes, but it's really important to say that about 30% of the basis of economics in Brazil is related to agribusiness today. So it's a really important. The agribusiness is so really important to the economy in Brazil, and 60% of this production is exported to China. So in China, people doesn't meet batches or civets, or people eat Brazilian meat, Brazilian beef. So and at the same time, Brazilian politicians says, "Oh, this is a kind of problem in Brazil." So this kind of the virus under the wings of the chicken wings, it's so interesting, and including interesting in the case of the fake news and other things, because this is a real problem. The people found a virus in chicken, in Brazilian wings, chicken wings, yes, but the news talking about this kind of situation, Ana, vou precisar da sua ajuda. Depois de alguns meses, as notícias que falavam dessa situação dos vírus sobre as aves, elas foram alteradas. Eu tenho o registro disso. As notícias originais diziam que vírus foram encontrados em asas de frango na China. Depois, essas notícias foram alteradas para o seguinte, né? Asas de frango foram contaminadas na China. Essa mudança, né? Ou seja, não saíram mais do Brasil contaminadas. As notícias mudaram e começaram a dizer que elas foram contaminadas na China.
So basically the news, they were altered after certain months. So it was said that apparently, right, I mean, as he argues in his paper, that the chicken was already contaminated and going to China. And as he was arguing that 30% of the economics in Brazil is related to agribusiness, and of that 60% of the meat is exported to China. But so apparently, the virus was already on the chicken that was then exported to China, but now then the news were altered and they argued that they were actually contaminated in China and not already at the source.
Yeah. So this is so complicated, because this is a kind of fighting of narrative. No. Yeah. So Brazilian politicians accused the Chinese people to contaminate the Brazilian wings, chicken wings. So this is unreal. Yeah.
Super interesting. Kyriaki, do you want to ask your second question? I think we have time for one more.
Yeah, no, I wanted to kind of pick up on the conclusion of the paper, talking about asymmetries, and kind of I love the first paragraph of the conclusion. It just sums up to me everything about it's a great analysis about what's happening in the pandemic. And I wanted to kind of ask you about the emergent narratives that you call for in terms of the pandemic, like that are more entangled, that they kind of break the boundaries between the divisions, nature and culture, humans and animals, and whether you see those actually coming to affect people at large in Brazil, or is it just a discussion among academics? I've seen a lot of academic papers about this narrative, but are people kind of beginning to change the way that they think about contagions or human and animal relationships, for example? I mean, and just as like a footnote, I have a 5-year-old. And so when she started learning about coronavirus, she asked me, was the bat evil? Like the bat that gave us the coronavirus, was it the evil one? So it's just kind of how do we tell the story differently, and whether there are stories out there, even for kids, to kind of think about the pandemic and the lay kind of public at large that are taking place.
Yeah, well, thank you for this question too. So really, this is the question we are moving on. So because there is two things here. We are talking about two different topics about COVID in this case, because on one hand, this kind of industry facilitates the contamination because of the work conditions. So yeah, but in other hand, and following the Rob Wallace discussion, this kind of industry facilitates the immersion of virus. So facilitate the spread and facilitate the immersion. So it's twice problematic industry because they facilitate the virus and they facilitate the contamination. And in this case, we think unfortunately we don't change our thought about the human-animal relations, especially in Brazil, because agribusiness is increasing, and agro is poppy, agro is tech is that kind of advertisement, I don't know, a slogan in Brazil. So I think we have a problem related related to the biosecurity issues, because biosecurity turn invisible this kind of relation. Agribusiness, we can see this kind of relation. We can buy soy sugar strawberry in Whole Food markets, but with no think about the Latin American migrant working in precarious conditions under the sun in California. We can buy a beef, but with no think about the migrant labor or other things, or the degradation, because the biosecurity interventions create a kind of borders, maintaining distances. So, and this is a big problem in this framework, because this border. Não, eu preciso dizer uma coisa antes, Ana. Tem uma coisa aqui que me parece também importante de falar em relação ao texto, é que o quanto que essas políticas de biossegurança, elas deixaram de ser só biossegurança e viraram uma espécie de relações políticas, né? Eu quero dizer com isso o seguinte, antes eram protocolos de laboratório, mas agora são formas, por exemplo, de você controlar fronteiras culturais, fronteiras de estado, fronteiras de espécie, ou seja, humanos e animais têm que ser mantidos distantes, porque eles podem ser uma ameaça, mas migrantes também devem ser mantidos distantes, porque você, por exemplo, um latino-americano ou alguém do Oriente Médio pode ser potencialmente perigoso quando entra nos Estados Unidos, por exemplo, sabe? Então, a biossegurança virou uma política de separações, separação das pessoas, separação das culturas, separação das nações, separação das espécies.
Yeah. So yeah, so it is important also to say, as he argues in his paper, that actually the politics of biosecurity turned into a political relationship as well. The politics of biosecurity used to be protocols used in scientific labs. That's where they were prevalent and important, but now they're also causing these borders, not only between states, but also animals, migrants. So basically what it causes is that it causes the separation of species, peoples, and nations. And he sees that as very problematic.
Yeah. Então, o segundo ponto, e acho mais próximo da questão, é o quanto que você cria essas fronteiras pensando essa separação, ela, digamos assim, ela atrapalha o envolvimento. As pessoas estão menos envolvidas com os ambientes, menos envolvidas com as outras pessoas, menos envolvidas com os animais, né? Você tem, por exemplo, animais e ambientes como objetos, como recursos, e não como parceiros, não como uma corresponsabilidade, não como uma espécie de, como Clark says, uma espécie de companheiro, como a Dana Haraway falou, uma espécie de parente, sabe?
Yeah, so exactly. So, and as Jean argues, when you create these borders, they cause a very troubled separation of the environment. So you know that the relationship grows way worse, also between human animals, as Donna Haraway also argues. So it's a means to an end relationship and not based on mutual care.
Yeah, it's a kind of not only an human exceptionalism, but increasingly a kind of male exceptionalism, because this is a kind of a male exceptionalism because this is a fetishism to put animals under control by domestication. It's a fetishism to put plants under control by the technology of the cultivation technologies. It's a kind of male fetishism to put women under control because of the reproduction roles and gender inequalities and other things. And this is a kind of put the nature under control because the nature needs to be converted into a resource, not a partner, not a part of your relation. This is an objectification of the nature, or neoliberalization of the nature. I don't know how to say, but this is the problem here, and we are increasing this kind of thought in this case, male fetishes to put the world under control and to trying to grow up in economics, but trying to the world such as an object, not a partner.
Thank you so much. We usually wrap up right on the hour. I was going to invite Melanie to ask her question. I don't know if you still want to ask it with your research assistant there, but if you want to, Melanie, go right ahead.
I'll try. Just very briefly, I'm curious if you've tried to, kind of like translated the academic paper into more popular media, and if there is a more public discussion outside of the academic discussion, because I think it's hugely important, and it totally resonates across the global South. And I think people in the global North need to know as well. Like, do you have any ideas for how we center capitalism and like post-colonial power inequalities in the whole COVID debate? Because as you say, it's not the problem is not the virus, the problem, and I think multi-species ethnography can highlight that very nicely. The problem is the relationships around it.
Yeah, this is a really exciting. Thank you, Melanie. This is a really exciting challenge, but it's not easy because, firstly, to talk about agribusiness in Brazil, it's so complicated because they had a lot of lobby among the politicians, and if you are doing research about agribusiness, especially touching in toxicity and other kind of degradation, we can have cut your budget for research. It's a real problem. But I am trying to expose this situation in other kinds of formats, not only the papers or articles, but in podcasts and in some video debates or webinars and other things. And we are a really interesting community in Brazil, so different parts of Brazil, trying to increase the debates on organic, so biofoods and slow foods and other things. So this is a really interesting space to debate these ideas, but it's a kind of resistance. Resistance is a kind of a non-mainstream discussion, but it's a really exciting community. And also, I think this is a real point. I put a quotation, and I don't know, for Ulrich Brand and Marcus Wissen. This is a book about the imperial mode of life, and I think it's directly for your question, because they wrote the everyday life in the capitalism centers is essentially possible through the constitution of social relation between humans and relation between society and nature elsewhere. That is, through unlimited access to labor, natural resources, and thanks. Yes, thanks, because capitalism must need to make invisible the destruction and exploitation. So Brazil, for example, is the elsewhere, is the other place. So, and because when you're talking about a global threat, in the case of pandemic, for example, global threat means a threat against Europe, a threat against United States, because Latin Americans and I don't know, Middle East or Asian people are a threat, because I don't know, Latin Americans maybe get the work positions. Middle East people may be terrorists. Asian people maybe eat a bat, a soup of bat, and get contaminated. So we are the threat, and so this kind of thing appears in the case of the pandemic. The I don't know, a memory of the colonial times. We are the threat. We are the sink. We are the place where for you for people in North in global North have a coffee or have a tea, use sugar or a cotton t-shirt. This people need precarious labor, precarious worker in the south of in the global south. So we are living a memory of the colonial times, yes, and the pandemic is the same thing, because like I told you, Brazilian increased her beef and pork and chicken production last year. But in the last year, the country entered in the hunger map again after 25 years. So people producing food for global north, but not here. So people are hunger here and producing food. This is a kind of I don't know, problematic way of life. So people dying, literally dying, people getting sick while producing food for others, not for themselves.
A super powerful point, and so I really want to thank you for joining us today. It's been a sobering dialogue, but you know, I think you're raising all the important points. So I hope you come back. Thank you.
Thank you for your participation, because
For sure. And I also want to give a brief plug for next week. So we have Fan Yang, a scholar based in Maryland and Baltimore, who's an expert on capitalism, speed, and temporality in China. And she'll be talking to us about you know, her take on how all these things have intersected in the pandemic. So it's really, again, a great pleasure to virtually meet you and be connected to colleagues in Brazil. And please do come back for future reading group discussions. So thanks again, and bye.
Thank you, Evan. Thank you, Rachel. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Thanks, Anne.
Sure.
Thanks so much for
Bye.
helping.
Yeah, thank you especially to Anne today.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.